pleasure for me to introduce Dr. Craig Shelton from MITRE. How many of you people know what MITRE does or is? Anybody heard of MITRE? There you go, see? Well, that's the end of that, right? You've heard of MITRE? Yes. Yeah, so he may be introduced a little bit about MITRE, right? So he's here to talk about some of the research that he's been doing, sort of interesting, a little bit of cybersecurity, but also a little bit of human nature and everything in here. So please welcome Dr. Shelton. And
thank you. First note, I've got my GoPro going, so if you speak up, your voice will be recorded, but the camera won't be aimed at you. This is primarily to help me improve my own presentation and speaking skills. Before I dive in, I will give you a brief item about MITRE, since Dr. Murphy mentioned that. MITRE is a not-for-profit corporation founded as a spin-off of the Lincoln Lab and MIT in the mid-50s to support the Air Force. The corporation's only business is running federally funded research and development centers for the federal government. Therefore, we're currently up to 7 research and development centers supporting various the Defense Department, the intelligence community, the Federal Aviation Administration, more recently the United States court system and the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. If any of you are on the Scholarship for Service program, employment at MITRE counts as your payback time, just like if you were at a government institution. I don't know, are any of y'all on the Scholarship for Service? We bring quite a few people in on that, and it's great because it counts as your payback time, and MITRE will reimburse your tuition if you want to jump straight into a master's while you're with us also.
okay, you also have a series of internships, correct?
We do.
And they should be applying now.
We do, and for the information assurance cybersecurity arena, the coordinator for the internships on that is Steve Batista, who is president of the local Northern Virginia ISSA chapter. Dr. Murphy's very familiar with him, and we can help get you information on any of that also. So lots of opportunities, and our internships are paid. They are not like the Capitol Hill come down to work for free for a summer. We have both. We have a few high school students and undergrad and master's students all in the internship program. Now, I also have to say, and if you can read the fine print at the bottom, MITRE requires me to note that I'm not speaking for them, and they don't necessarily agree with anything I say. But since I work for them, I've got to let you know that that's okay. Now, about the time I started high school, my dad knew I was going to be doing speaking and taking public speaking classes, so he gave me the generic outline for all speeches and presentations. So y'all can share that, use it, keep it in mind, it actually works. What just happened there?
It's just outdated.
There it is. It wants me to restart. I don't want to do that. All right. Now, what I'm really going to work on tonight is lead off with a little bit of background on the research I did last year on people following the cybersecurity rules that they've been trained. This is timely because this month is the Cybersecurity Awareness Month nationwide. You are getting a preview tonight of the presentation I will be giving next month in a webinar for ISSA on the Security and Education and Awareness Special Interest Group. So I appreciate you letting me practice on y'all, and you get the advanced word. This does tie in, and one of the reasons this is important, and that I'll get into more later, some folks, there's a major portion of the working population in our profession that focuses on security awareness and training. And what I'm going to talk about includes how that fits into the larger cybersecurity world. It should not stand alone in the way it works. So I'll look at the research, we'll put it in perspective, and I'll give you a bit of a little introduction to systems thinking also, because this is how it all fits together. And we'll then get into some practical applications. It's pretty well known that there's a problem that we train people and they don't follow the training. That's the top line is quoted from one of the papers that I cited. That's the academic way of stating it, but we know what the real issue is. People don't follow the rules.
It starts when they're student.
So my research was, why don't they? And it turns out when I started looking at cybersecurity, information security research, safety research, medical practices research, that a whole lot of people had come up with ways to study why within a single framework, but nobody simply asked the question. So that's what I worked on. Now, I wanted to set aside whether or not people have been trained. So I went to a publicly available standard training program developed by and for the Defense Department, but used by a wide variety of federal government agencies. Get back. And this is the screenshot from that training. Everybody who took my survey, I asked them, have you had your training within the last 2 years? So I knew they'd seen this, and then I picked a couple of the questions that I asked directly from this. So I could set aside the I didn't get trained, nobody told me. From there, this is what I wrote. Now, this is wordy because I had to do this for the survey, the way I set it up. Notice what I'm really going for here is tell me why you didn't follow the rule. I will note that my pre-questions were set up to make the in reality and the understanding of the survey people as anonymous as possible, because I'm asking them, I asked them, why did you break the rules? So they have to admit to breaking the rules. The number count was a side issue because what I really wanted was their narrative of the reasons why. I was able to use the 5 timelines to do a couple of charts, and I'll show you those. So, how many people used, how often used password composition? 2/3 of the people did not use information from their personal lives. But 1/3 did. So, right away, a very basic rule. Don't put stuff in there that lets people guess your password. 1/3 of the people do it anyway. And you can see the trail off. It's pretty good. But then, how many of you have written passwords down? Drops by half. 2/3 of the people have written their passwords down, at least some of them. So you can see that we know right from that. Training. Big chunk of the population doesn't care. So, why? Well, the obvious reason. Thematic analysis on the narratives that I got, so they can help, so I can remember them. It's too hard to remember. And there's a repeat of the numbers that I just gave you a moment ago. Recording passwords, very similar answers. Too many passwords, too complex to remember. And that's what drove up the writing them down issue. So, breaking it down into simple groups, I couldn't do it. I can't remember them. Nobody can do it. And these folks didn't answer the question I asked. Instead, they told me how they wrote them down. Password banks, vaults, encrypted, whatever. But that's okay. We know the intuitively obvious answers now proven by a publicly administered survey that, yeah, people can't remember them. So the obvious conclusion inferred from that is the ability, whether it's I don't believe I can or surely nobody can, totally overwhelms the training. So training isn't going to get you there. So that gets us into, let's look at cybersecurity. I'm going to take just a moment and give you this real simple basics of how to think about a system. The systems engineering world has grown up over the number of years, and it's used at a high level for all kinds of information technology systems, military for weapons systems, communication systems. It's a general overlay of a way to approach problems and questions. And the most basic part of it is every system has multiple components or elements that can be generally spoken of as falling into one of 3 categories. The people who are involved in the system, the processes they use with this system, and the tools they have. And you can see I've broken out some sub-elements to those. If you go study systems engineering and look at the books on that. MITRE is a systems engineering company, so we've got our own systems engineering handbook. And COSI is the professional society. They've got a handbook. We work together on a lot of that stuff. But you'll see the people area, which is, let's go back to my research topic, is where I was focused. And the people who bring to your system knowledge, skills, abilities, beliefs, expectations, ethics, motivation, lots of different factors. Processes, the overall policy. Don't write your password down. Rules, your password has to be this long and be changed every so often. And the procedures, this is how we do it. Those are the sub-elements for a system. I like to work just at the high level most of the time and then focus in on what's important for any given topic. Now, let's talk about the training and education. What can you do and what can't you do with training and education? You can sit in a classroom, you can take a computer-based training, you can do online and do a course or read a book. And you can learn how and why. You can get knowledge about the program, and you can even do skills ability. You can go into the lab and work, get hands-on, and lock down the hardware system, set up your intrusion detection system. What training cannot do is make you willing to take action. This is where we recognize the failure of relying totally on security awareness training to take care of the people component of your system, your cybersecurity system. Now, password strength. I did not ask about how well people did on password strength because most significant major systems enforce that. If you put a password in that doesn't meet all the rules, it says not a good password, it won't allow it. So that's why I didn't ask the question in my research survey, but I wanted to show you how ugly it can get. This is from, I'm retired from the Air Force, so my retired pay comes from the defense finance system. My password for that system has to follow all of these rules. And I have to change it slightly more often than twice a year. And I only need to use it about 3 times a year. How easy is that going to be to memorize? Now, remember people, process, and tools? Think in terms of a problem with the system and don't automatically focus in on one component. You focus in on training your people. Wait a minute, maybe you've got a tool solution. This one is a tool solution. Password complexity can be enforced by the tool of the software at the login system. Now, XKCD has approached the password strength problem. It's a little difficult to read, and I got it as big as I could, but the basic information here that Randall has given us is we've made it real hard to remember and real easy for machines to figure out with our rules. Because how many of you studied password entropy or cryptographic entropy? Hadn't done your deep crypto stuff? If you study a crypto course, you'll get that. Basically, the bigger the pool of options, the greater the entropy. The more rules you put in the password, reduce the entropy, and it's easier to figure out. Let's postpone that. It's going to come back in 10 minutes. So then, I sat down and started trying to count how many passwords and pins I've got. I have over 70. When you think about these categories, how many do you have? If you've got to have a highly complex, hard to remember password for 25, 50, 100 sites, are you going to be able to remember those? Yeah. So people reuse their passwords, and we tell them don't do that. At XKCD, Randall said, hey, all I got to do is set up an attractive website, make people log in, and they're going to give me one of their passwords they reuse, and then I just go out and find them other places until I find out what get into their other accounts. This is not a trivial situation. Jot that phrase down and Google it. There is a corporation called H.P. Gary Professional that is no longer in existence. H.P. Gary still exists, but H.P. Gary Professional gave special security services, information security services, to the intelligence community of the government. When Anonymous started getting big, the president of H.P. Gary Professional bragged that he would get them back. They got into one of his minor accounts, got the password there, used it to go into the corporate account, pulled out all of his email, all of his private traffic, and exposed it. The company had to be shut down. Password reuse is important. But people reuse passwords because they can't remember 80 passwords. So read the story on that, and that one phrase will get you to sufficient stories about it. It's pretty interesting. Now, if training doesn't get us there, what do we know about how to motivate people to do what we need them to do? We don't. What we know is psychologists and sociologists have been working for decades on lots of theories of how to motivate people and why people act. Two of my references that I use, Dr. Abraham up in New York in her dissertation, she gave me a nice table that she'd gone through the information security world and had come up with 11 different theories on action and motivation that were cited in the research. A year later at a conference in Hawaii, this team identified 54. Well, if the psychologists and sociologists have that many, then we don't have a single simple answer we can go to. So we're going to have to rough it a little bit. Here's some general categories of motivation theory: reward, punishment, achievement. The hierarchy needs, I'm going to talk about in a moment again. Decision choice, and self-interest, which actually comes from the seed document of the world of economics and Adam Smith. If you have to take a basic economics course, you'll hear about him. Abraham Maslow was a psychologist who looked at motivation theory, and in the 50s, the 40s, I don't remember the timing on that, he came up with an easy-to-remember and intuitively useful structure for motivation, which if you take an advanced management course, you will invariably see, and that is human beings build on their needs, distinguish needs from desires, and until the more base needs are met, you don't move up. Physiological, food, water, shelter, get up to safety, protection, then you start getting into the social needs, the love and belonging, dealing with others, esteem, that's a certain amount of self-esteem and a certain amount of recognition of yourself by the people around you. And when you're taught this hierarchy of needs, self-actualization, where you are motivating yourself because this is something you know you want to do. That's a way to go about it. I throw this out here for a couple of reasons. If you continue in management training, I know you'll see Maslow, and it's a nice, helpful one to remember, but it illustrates a way of approaching how you motivate people to move forward. Well, what I came up with is based upon what we've got of stuff that can't be done. Either I don't believe I can do it or I don't believe anybody can do it. Stuff that's too hard that doesn't meet the physiological or doesn't meet the physical capabilities. Some basic recommendations. First, figure out if you're going to come up with a cybersecurity rule. Don't sit in your lab and just look at the one little box that you're working on in your IT system. Think about what people actually need to do on their jobs. Put it into their capabilities and their environment. What can people do? What can they actually do? And what will fit into their work area? And as I mentioned earlier on the password complexity, look at all the tools, the processes, and the tools that you have, not just the people. So from that, we can look at different ways of motivating external from the training. There are people who insist we've got to have rewards. We want to reinforce them with rewards for doing well. Have you ever heard of anybody getting the best password award anywhere? Is there any way to measure whether somebody has reused a password in too many systems and punish them for it? No. So rewards and punishment, that's not going to get you there for a lot of things that we need to do. By the way, I'm just using the password rules as a simple example. This logic will go all the way through all of the different procedures that you want to train your users to know about and follow. There's another thing that I did not cover in my survey, and in hindsight I realized I should have. We follow rules for different reasons than we break them. It's not a mirror image. So consider that as part of the process when you're looking at how you're going to deal with trying to get your system secure by working together with the people that you have, the processes they follow, and the tools that you give them to use. It was, had I asked my question differently, I might have been able to get some information on if you didn't break the rule, why did you follow? But that's a different set. And this kind of was an eye-opener. I was like, darn, I didn't ask the right question. So there's more information to be obtained on that topic if somebody has a chance to
Can I
do the
just
work.
ask you a question of
Yes, ma'am.
Because if I think back, I don't know, let's just take as an example celebrity iCloud situation, right? When you consider them to be punished?
That was a social punishment that came from the outside, but not imposed by any security people who were trying to make it happen. You're right, but they would have had to foresee that and realize that it was going to happen.
And stop them doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, we're talking about what can we as cybersecurity professionals do to harden our cybersecurity system to make it work. And we can't guarantee that's going to happen. Unless we do some highly unethical things like go out and find the stuff and expose them, do the anonymous trick on the HPV account. That's not what we're going to do. So yes, it's a form of after-fact punishment, not one that would motivate them to act better.
Might motivate them next time.
Yeah. This is, by the way, why as an old military guy, I've never been in favor of secret punishments. You know how we don't want to embarrass him, so we'll just slap him on the wrist, fine him, and then make him go away. Public executions. If you find somebody for breaking a major, significant rule, tell the whole company. You don't have to use his name, but other people need to know it really happens. That's a side issue, and that's a philosophy of if you're going to do rewards and punishments, advertise them both, because that's the next time. Learning from somebody else's last time instead of your own is always less painful. Now, let's talk a minute about on the job. Look over this list. We do our security awareness training. We say, security is everybody's job. Okay. We all have higher and lower priorities on the job. You see this list of priorities these people have? One of the papers that I found as I was doing my research was from a nurse's journal where the nurses are actually proud of coming up with workarounds of hospital rules and procedures for safety, security, and other things because their high priority is caring for patients. And if those other rules get in the way of that, they want to find workarounds to go back to caring for patients. I've got 3 cousins and 2 sisters-in-law who are nurses. I will tell you, that's their priority. So that line at the top, that's not going to do you a lot of good in the real world. But this is the reason that we have to look at our procedures that we ask people to follow, rules that we tell them they must follow, and put that into the context of their jobs. Now I'm going to be talking to a larger audience with a broader career status the next time I give this presentation, so I want to know from them, do they follow these rules themselves? If you can't follow it, why do you expect your people to? This is another lesson in leadership and management. By the way, you lead people, you manage stuff, things, processes. But keep this in mind. If you are coming up with, boy, I got to make everybody do this to keep things secure, would you follow that rule? I don't know. It wants to go again. We're going to postpone it some more. Now, the other side of the coin, I had somebody point this out to me recently. What I'm saying here is don't just dive in and do what the head down, looking only at the command line interface on the terminal expert says do. Pay attention to the total environment, but this doesn't mean ignore that person either. What you got to do is bring together the expertise of the deep security professional with the expertise of the job environment. And you've got different experts. We've got great coders and pen testers and such. They know the security technology. But the folks out there doing the work, they're the expert on the job, and their boss is the ones who have to put it together. So this is another message that I want to carry through to leadership world in information security and the non-security people that they report to, that they work for. Ran into this quote about a month ago, long after I put together the idea of what I wanted to talk about. And this is just too good. Oracle is one of the biggies. And you'll see, I bolded the last part because that makes my point. Training works when it works on the job. By the way, if you get a chance to work security for Oracle someday, when they bring people into the company, especially coders, database administrators and coders and such, 6 solid months of security training before they're allowed to go out and work security. And that's the lesson that they've learned, that coming out of academic programs in the open community, that's what they need to do to make sure that people really understand how to work the security aspects for the Oracle Corporation. But I love that, stumbling across that statement about effective training. People who get into the security training business often get a mentality of, it's the people that are the problem. We can just get rid of the people, we can just fix the people, we wouldn't have a security problem. They're not always the problem, and training's not always the solution. We want to work with what happens on the job, and we want to motivate in the job, not the classroom, because that's the only place it's going to work. And let's go back to that people, processes, and tools. Figure out how you can merge the three together to solve any given security problem. Don't just focus on the people. Don't just focus on the tools. Because sometimes you've got to use 2 and 3 components. So we have a big problem. People don't follow the rules we train them on. I asked people why they didn't follow the rules, and they gave me some answers. By the way, that is not a statement of why people don't follow the rules. It's a statement of why they say they don't. I'll throw you back to the psychologist again to think about that. Training is a subsystem of the people component. We saw the list of what training can do for you and what it can't do for you. Motivation, willingness, actual action is not a guaranteed result of the best training in the world. So keep that in mind. I've said it several times. Consider the people, but use the entire system to solve your problems. Now here's homework. If we can pass these links out. The seed for my idea of moving forward on this topic was about a 45, 50-minute keynote presentation several years ago at the ISSA International Conference by Dr. Capel at Pennsylvania. It's not about cybersecurity. It's about hospitals handling drugs in the wards. But he talks about this whole issue of pay attention to what's on the job. It's an excellent presentation. It really makes you think about these issues. And remember, he's a sociologist and a medical school researcher, and he's talking at the security conference, the ISSA. That's excellent. Next, if you're going to be doing any kind of development, the concept of paying attention to your users is excellently developed by Alan Cooper. Alan Cooper wrote Visual Basic. I first came across him when I was doing an interface requirement, and I bought his book About Face, and it was about what your screen should look like. Then I stumbled across this little book, The Inmates Are Running the Asylum. This is a big, huge book, and if you're actually doing system architecture, system design, I recommend it. But Inmates Are Running the Asylum, I recommend to everybody, even outside of the IT world, because it talks about what happens when you bring us left-brain engineer types to build a system that's going to be used by artists. We don't think alike. But if we design it for ourselves as engineers, it's not going to work for the artists. Highly recommend both those books. Finally, remember I'm getting into an older crowd in a lot of this, so I'm giving them the homework assignment to follow XKCD. A couple of years ago, I had a young fellow at a dinner party say, I got to show you this really neat thing, and he showed me a cartoon about XKCD, and I said, yeah, that's cool. My daughter went to college with Randall. And she did, down at Christopher Newport. References are here, meaningless tonight. But when I give this same talk next month, ISSA needs to have a short quiz at the end that people have to pass to get their continuing education credit. So they asked me for 5 quiz questions. You get to take the quiz as a group. First quiz question. What makes up a system? Somebody speak up. Okay, people, processes, and tools. I'm hoping some of you at least got tempted by a couple of the IT ones in there. Second quiz question. Maslow has a hierarchy of... Very good. I hammered that one a lot. Okay, what can training not get you? Right. We talked about nurses. What has the lowest priority out of those list of 5? These are all legitimate priorities of every nurse on a ward. You got it. Our area of concern, least important to them. And finally, what's the average number of passwords and pins an average adult has to?
3, 5.
They can go 5.
Depends if they use the same one all the time.
That's what I was going for.
Very good. So
I could argue.
I appreciate you going through
I was
that.
paying 3. I was paying 3.
I only have 3.
I know it's exam week. However, I'm willing to hang around and answer questions either up here or back in the back as long as you all like. And we did our about 35 minutes.
Okay, good.
Very good.
Okay. Anybody got any questions?
Yeah, I can have one.
Yes.
It's more like a complicated question, but you know how like you're talking about people don't follow rules?
Yes.
And like you can actually see that outside in the real world, so where people don't follow rules. But they don't get trained, they get police, and police make sure that they follow the rules. What about instead of investing on training, we start like pen testing these people or like your business or whatever, and finding errors like, oh, I found Kevin has the same password on these 2 things, and then like start working from there. Not really punish them, but like tell them like, hey, we find out that you have 2 passwords from the same website or for these 2 different websites. You should change this.
That's been used, and I will give you long before we were talking in this kind of world. 1980s, we put when I was working at Andrews Air Force Base, we put in a new networking system. This was long before the World Wide Web existed. The internet existed of a sort. It was out there. And for the military network, we put in a new network connection. And the network, the whole data communications boss, who was a friend of mine, was monitoring where people were going on the internet. And he had to call in one of his younger officers and say, we got the network report, and you went to this porn site while you were on the Air Force machine in the office. Oh, well, see, I was going, and I clicked on this one link, and it accidentally went there. And he looked at his report sheet, and it said, you accidentally went there 500 times. Okay. So, yes, that can be a component.
See, but now if the same person does the same again, like if in the next report you see, oh, we talked about this last month, what happened? So
that goes back to, if you are going to have rules and enforcement, there must be meaningful consequences, and they should be advertised in advance. That's why I was talking about the public execution every once in a while. That's part of your advertising. Yes, sir.
Yeah, they're good. So you mentioned people process, and I was just wondering about the tools, but there's secondary authentication process. I know Yahoo just recently launched a secondary need for their email, where they send you a text message, put the code in, it works.
Yes, definitely. A properly developed 2-factor authentication system, and I emphasize properly developed because some people come up with 2 different things you know.
Right.
That's not a true 2-factor. But if you have an RSA secure ID, which I have to have for business, which that's a running, frequently changing one-time use password that combines, that's a way. The SMS text message across the phone, there are problems that can accrue with that, but that is the use of a tool to get away from the password. So that's a very good example.
You see, I question, for example, the whole credit card stuff and going to chip and pin, right? And somehow we know that's a tool that is a solution, because it's used all over the world except in the United States.
Now, there's been some recent discussion in the press and in the professional arena about the United States late adoption of chip and pin. You've got your credit card and it has little gold contacts on it. You've got a chip and pin.
Now you got a chip.
You've got, well, you've got a chip, and Dr. Murphy's right. Here's what's happened. The European EMV system, which has had chip and pin for, 8 years, something like that, when you plug that card in, you have to type in the pin that will activate the onboard crypto, and that's actually a little bitty computer. It processes on the card. It does not process in the terminal or back at the home station. That runs the process. And it actually processes the crypto to validate your expense. In the United States, most of the banks and stores that are using them, Walmart now uses them in some of their Walmarts. Target, surprisingly, is not, even though they were the cause of everybody going, oh my God, we're going to do this. They have what they call chip and signature. You put it in, and then you still sign the little screen, just like you did when you swiped. And chip and signature does not activate the onboard crypto. So they are assuming that the fact that you've got the card means you're legitimate. Maybe, maybe not. It does not use the crypto, so it's secondary. And the reality of the reason stores are not doing chip and pin is just going to chip and signature is slower than a swipe. Going to chip and pin is even slower than that. And they don't want their customers complaining that it's taking twice as long to get through the checkout line. So there is an offset of customer convenience that the stores are using and doing chip and signature instead of chip and pin.
You get used to it, right? You know, it's habituation.
That's it.
Most of the stores don't even have the chip turned on yet. They just have the hardware, but
yeah, I've gone into a lot of stores where I recognize they've got the new reader, and I said, do I plug it in the bottom? And they said, no, just go ahead and swipe it. Last time I was in Target, it was like that. And as I said, it was the Target breach that caused the banks and the regulators to say, you got to go to chip cards. That's another thing that if you study your business side of the world, businesses make decisions based upon projected risk and cost of investment. This is one of the things that makes it difficult for those of us doing cybersecurity for the government, where you can't put a dollar value on a loss from national security information the same way you can do a dollar cost on how much is it going to cost to buy LifeLock for 2 million people. And they will do a return on investment calculation and take the more risky, easier to run process if by their figures it would cost more to implement the higher protection than to pay off all of the problems from a loss based upon an estimated percentage of the probability of loss. And that's a standard business calculation. People don't like to hear this, but this is what insurance companies do in figuring out how much to do life insurance. What's the value of a life and what's the likelihood we're going to have to pay off within X number of years.
Can you talk a little bit about password vaults?
Sure. Password vaults, the one thing to know is that there are several different ways to do password vaults. They can be a separate device. They can be a program on a computer. They can be an application on a mobile device. There are two ways that you can use them. One is you still develop your own passwords and you just store it there. It's an encrypted vault. You look it up when you need it. The other is it generates highly complex passwords, and all you tell it is which account you need it for. And today, it's not perfect, but it's better than these other passwords. And it's not a two-factor authentication, but it allows you to have some control over your 25, 50, 75 passwords while living with a world where every magazine website wants you to have a password. Every membership organization wants to have a password. And they are not the same password. It avoids password reuse. It gives a certain level of protection, but you do have to understand what you're getting with it. And then if you have to work on different computers where the password vault has to talk directly to the site, and you have multiple computers, it's difficult you can't keep the same vault on separate computers. If I'm working an unclassified system and a classified system, I can't use a password vault on both systems. So it's an advantage, it's a benefit, but it's not two-factor, it's simply a better protection for your passwords.
Yeah, that's why when you hear some of these breaches and all they're giving you is credit card report, and they're saying, I don't know why you don't give me free access to a better tool.
Yes.
So that I can change my behavior rather than just tell me, my credit card's going to be audited.
Then there are all of us who were affected by the breach of the Office of Personnel Management and all the security investigations. The government is going to give us a competitor to Lifeline. Big deal. The people who stole that information aren't going for identity theft to create new credit cards. They have other goals in the national security environment totally separate from that. LifeLock and its competitors are not going to help.
To
Yes.
that point, how do you feel about behavioral analytics and solutions that look at what profile what individuals do as a way of identifying them?
That has a lot of promise. There are a lot of people working on it. It's a soft area. Anytime you get into sociology, behavior, psychology, it's a softer area. It's a science, but it's not a really hard science. So you're working with estimates and probabilities. We've got several things going on right now in that arena. One is to use that even to things like typing keys for its identification. Now, what happens if you stub your finger catching a baseball? Your typing key is keys. So there are pros and cons to using those. The other area that the behavioral analytics have been used is trying to do predictive work on who's going to go rogue on you in your system. Post-Snowden, the insider threat world is huge in the government. And part of the effort, not only for the IT rogue, but also the crazy with the Fort Hood shooting and the Navy Yard shooting, people are trying to figure out, can we see what people do and at least put indicators that they might go postal on us and shoot the place up. So there's the insider threat is a physical threat as well as a data system threat. And the analytics that folks are working on, it's fuzzy because how do you know until you get enough data and see real world cases? Either can you capture old data and as a needle in a haystack, see if you can find Snowden in that haystack of old data. I don't even know if that kind of data would be available, but that would be a test of your algorithm. Or do you start pinging people, but you don't go pick them up and fire them, you wait until something happens, but you're able to be right there, and you see how many of those exposed. So it's a brand new area. It's a big data area, it's a complex algorithmic area, and people are trying to figure out what can we look at and correlate to do that. Yes, ma'am.
When you said reward, is a simple acknowledgement, would that be a reward? Would that kind of still be within that realm? Because a lot of those phishing simulation, security awareness training, if you click the link, you get, the education page. But if you report the button, you get an acknowledgement that says great job. That immediate acknowledgement.
Yes, that is, and that takes us back to the variety of motivational theories and what works. And one of the other papers that came out 2 years ago, and it was a collaboration between Dr. Deanna Caputo at MITRE and a couple of other academics. They tested what works better. When you click on the phishing email, when you do wrong and click on it, does it work better to take you straight to the training page or to go back a week or two later and give you the training then? And they found out that taking you straight to the training page doesn't work very well.
I thought you'd be receptive at that moment.
No. They don't know why, but my guess is you're a little ticked off at having been fooled.
So you close it.
Yeah. They have done the research to figure out why it doesn't work as well, but that's my assumption because I know that when I've been in unannounced simulations, I've been really ticked.
Okay, well, I know some of you have class at 6:30, so I just want to thank Dr. Sheldon. Please thank him.
Oh, great. I need that. Yes. Lots of coffee drunk in my world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I'll hang around.